The war between the Zalari Empire and the United Terran Federation had been going on for as long as anyone could remember. For both sides, the fighting seemed endless, like a storm that refused to pass. On the Zalari homeworld, tall silver towers stretched up toward the swirling purple sky. It was here that King Jarian ruled. He was strong, proud, and loved his only daughter, Princess Lysera, more than anything in the universe. One cold evening, King Jarian stood on the balcony of his palace, looking down at the lights of his capital city. His heart was heavy. News had come from the front lines, a terrible message that Princess Lysera's ship had been destroyed in battle. The last anyone had seen of her was a burst of flames as her transport fell from the sky. The king's advisors tried to comfort him, but he only stared into the night, silent and broken. The court mourned with him, and across the empire, Zalari citizens wept for their lost princess. But far away, on a ruined planet covered in ash and twisted metal, Lysera was very much alive. She woke slowly, her head pounding and her vision blurred. Everything felt cold and heavy. She tried to sit up but cried out in pain. A sharp sting ran through her arm. The small escape pod around her was dark and filled with smoke. She remembered the attack. Enemy ships, explosions, alarms blaring, her guards shouting her name. She remembered the impact, the feeling of falling. Then nothing. With great effort, Lysera unbuckled her safety harness and crawled toward the pod's exit. She pressed the emergency release, and the hatch popped open with a hiss. Cold, dry air rushed in, carrying the smell of burnt metal. She pulled herself outside and collapsed onto the rough ground. All around her, the remains of a destroyed city stretched as far as she could see. Broken towers, crashed ships, and blackened skeletons of buildings made it feel like she was alone at the end of the world. She tried to stand, but her legs were too weak. She pressed a button on her wrist communicator, hoping for a signal, but it only buzzed with static. The sky above was cloudy, hiding the stars, and there was no sign of life. No Zalari, no Terrans, nothing. For the first time in her life, Princess Lysera felt completely helpless. She didn't know how long she lay there, drifting in and out of sleep, but at some point, she heard footsteps crunching through the rubble. Fear gripped her heart. Was it an enemy? A scavenger? She tried to hide, but she was too weak to move. A shadow appeared over her, blocking what little light there was. She heard a voice, deep and strangely gentle, speaking in a language she did not know. Her eyes struggled to focus. The figure knelt beside her, and she saw his face, a human, wearing battered military armor, his helmet pushed back so she could see his eyes. They were blue, filled with worry and kindness. The human spoke again, softer this time, and gently touched her arm. Lysera tried to push him away, but she had no strength. The human frowned, pulled out a small device, and ran it over her injuries. Warmth spread through her arm, dulling the pain. She stared at him in confusion. Why was an enemy helping her? The human motioned for her to drink from a water bottle. Lysera hesitated, but thirst got the better of her. She drank, and some strength returned to her body. He smiled, his face tired but kind, and offered her a ration bar. The taste was strange, but it filled her empty stomach. Hours passed. The human, whose name she learned was Nathan Carter, built a small fire from scraps and made a shelter from the wreckage. He spoke a little of her language, enough for them to understand simple words. "Safe," he said, pointing to the shelter. "Food. Rest." Lysera didn't know whether to trust him, but she had little choice. She watched as Nathan checked the horizon for danger, always alert, always ready. He moved with caution and skill, showing he was no ordinary soldier. She wondered why he was here, alone on a dead planet. That night, a storm rolled in. Wind howled through the ruins, shaking the shelter. Lysara shivered, wrapping herself in a blanket Nathan had given her. She listened to the sound of rain hitting metal and remembered her father, her people, and the home she might never see again. Tears ran down her cheeks, but she wiped them away, unwilling to show weakness. Nathan sat across from her, fixing a broken piece of equipment. He glanced at her, then at the tears on her face. Without a word, he slid over a small picture, 2 children and a woman smiling beside him. He tapped his chest. "Family," he said softly. Lysara nodded, understanding. Even enemies had families. They loved. The war suddenly felt even more senseless. In the morning, Nathan showed Lysara how to use a small device to scan for supplies. Together, they searched the ruins for anything useful. Nathan moved ahead, watching for danger, while Lysara followed, collecting medical kits and energy cells. Once, they found an old Zalari ration pack, and Lysara laughed as Nathan tried to eat it, making a face at the strange taste. For a moment, the war was forgotten, replaced by the small joys of survival, but danger was never far. Late that afternoon, as they searched a half-collapsed building, Nathan froze and pulled Lysara behind cover. Through a crack in the wall, she saw a group of armed raiders picking through the wreckage. They were neither human nor Zalari, just desperate scavengers looking for anything they could take. Nathan whispered instructions. Stay low. Stay quiet. Move only when he moved. He led her through the shadows, slipping past the raiders without being seen. Lysara's heart pounded with fear, but she did exactly as Nathan said. When they finally reached safety, she let out a shaky breath and realized how much she trusted him. That night, as they sat by the fire, Lysara spoke in halting words, telling Nathan who she really was, the daughter of King Jarian, the Lost, princess of the Zalari. Nathan listened, his expression serious. He promised to help her get home, no matter the risk. Together, they hatched a plan. Nathan would help Lysara reach a communication tower on the far side of the city. If they could send a signal, maybe someone would come. But it would be dangerous. The area was full of traps, raiders, and maybe even patrols from both armies. Still, Lysara agreed. She could not stay hidden forever. She had to try. As the fire burned low, Lysara looked at Nathan and saw more than an enemy. She saw a friend, a stubborn, brave human who had saved her life. For the first time since the crash, she felt hope. Somewhere out there, her father was waiting, and she would not give up. In the darkness, Lysara whispered a silent promise to herself. She would survive. She would return home, and she would never forget the human who helped her when she needed it most. As the pale morning light filtered through cracks in the battered metal roof, Lysara awoke from a restless sleep. Nathan was already up, checking supplies and making sure their makeshift camp had not been discovered during the night. The burned out building they called shelter stood like a skeleton among many in the ruined city, its walls covered in scars from weapons fire and old explosions. Lysara slowly sat up, stretching sore muscles, her mind filled with worry about what the day might bring. Nathan knelt by a small pile of salvaged gear. He nodded to Lysara, offering her a small meal, some fruit paste from a ration pack and a half-melted energy bar. Lysara accepted with a grateful smile. Food and water were precious here, and every bite mattered. The human watched her eat, concern in his eyes. "How is your arm?" he asked in careful Zalari, his accent thick but understandable. Lysara flexed her arm, the one that had been injured in the crash. Thanks to Nathan's medical skills and steady hands, the pain was much less now. "Better," she replied softly. "Thank you." Nathan simply nodded, busying himself with his old, battered rifle. It was clear he did not trust the quiet. He checked his weapon and scanned the area, always alert. Lysara admired his discipline. He was a soldier, but he acted more like a protector, always putting her safety first. As they finished their meal, Nathan unfolded a crumpled map. He pointed to a spot near the city's edge, a tall, half-collapsed tower with an old communications array. "We go here," he said, tapping the map. "Signal home." Lysara nodded, understanding the plan. The tower was their best hope of contacting her people, maybe even calling for rescue. But it was far away, across blocks of ruined streets and dangerous territory. She was afraid, but determined. They packed up quickly. Nathan hid the signs of their camp just in case anyone came searching. Before they left, Lysara looked at the dark sky, thinking of her father. Was he still searching for her? Did he believe she was alive? With a deep breath, she followed Nathan into the cold morning, both of them moving like shadows among the ruins. The city was silent, except for the wind whistling through broken windows. Sometimes Lysara thought she saw movement, an animal or maybe another survivor. She kept close to Nathan, who led the way with careful steps. He stopped at every corner, listening, watching, teaching her how to move quietly and use cover. Along the way, they came across the remains of an old Zalari patrol vehicle. Nathan checked it for supplies, finding a working flashlight and a canteen of clean water. Lysara's spirits lifted a little. Even the smallest luck felt like a gift. As they moved deeper into the city, the signs of past battles grew clearer. Smashed drones lay scattered in the streets, and burned banners from both sides hung limp from crumbling walls. Once, they passed, a mural painted by a child. Two figures, one Zalari and one human, holding hands. It made Lysara stop and stare. Nathan saw her looking and smiled, but his eyes were sad. "Maybe one day," he said quietly. They continued on, making their way through an old market full of overturned carts and shattered glass. Here they heard voices, rough, unfriendly, and speaking a language Lysara didn't recognize. Nathan quickly pulled her behind a pile of rubble. From their hiding place, they saw a gang of raiders, armed and desperate, arguing over some scrap of technology. Lysara's heart raced, but Nathan's calm gave her strength. They waited in silence, barely daring to breathe, until the raiders finally moved on. Only when the danger had passed did Nathan let out a slow breath. "Too close," he muttered. After a while, they found a quiet alley to rest and regroup. Nathan handed Lysara a small piece of paper with words written in both Terran and Zalari. It was a simple dictionary he'd made, teaching her basic words so they could talk better. Lysara was touched by the gesture, and she practiced some new words with Nathan, laughing at his attempts to say Zalari tongue twisters. For a few moments, the war seemed far away, replaced by something like friendship. Suddenly, a faint cry echoed through the empty streets. Lysara and Nathan froze. The sound came again, a voice weak and afraid, calling for help in the Zalari language. Without thinking, Lysara rushed toward the noise, with Nathan close behind her. They found the source in a collapsed doorway, a young Zalari soldier, barely older than a boy, trapped under a fallen beam. His leg was bleeding, and his face was pale with fear. He looked up, eyes wide with shock, when he saw Nathan's human uniform. The soldier tried to crawl away, but Lysara knelt beside him, speaking softly. "We're not here to hurt you. We want to help." With Nathan's strength and Lysara's careful hands, they managed to lift the beam and free the wounded soldier. Nathan quickly bandaged the boy's leg, moving with the same care he'd shown Lysara. The young Zalari's name was Tarl. He had been separated from his unit during the last battle and had hidden here for days, too afraid to move. Tarl stared at Nathan with confusion and suspicion. "Why does a human help me?" he asked Lysara, his voice trembling. "Because he is not like the others," Lysara answered simply. He saved me too." Nathan gave the boy some water and a ration bar. Tarl accepted them with shaking hands. For a while, they sat together in silence, the strange trio of survivors united by need. As the sun climbed higher, Nathan suggested they keep moving. Tarl, though injured, insisted on coming with them. He could not stay alone, and Lysara would not leave him behind. Together they pushed forward, moving more slowly now, but with greater purpose. When night fell, they found shelter in the remains of a school. Nathan set traps around the entrance, just in case, while Lysara and Tarl rested inside. They shared stories in broken sentences, Nathan telling of his childhood on Earth, Lysara describing the Zelari homeworld's gardens, Tarl speaking of his dreams of becoming a pilot. Despite the fear and danger, a sense of hope began to grow between them. They were no longer just survivors. They were a team. But danger returned sooner than they expected. Early the next morning, as Nathan checked their perimeter, he spotted movement. More raiders, this time better armed and searching the buildings. Nathan hurried back, urging Lysara and Tarl to gather their things. "We have to move, now," he said urgently. They left the safety of the school and crept through back alleys, trying to stay out of sight. But the raiders had spotted them. Soon they heard shouts and footsteps, getting closer with every passing second. Nathan led the way, using every trick he knew to stay ahead, doubling back, climbing over walls, using smoke grenades to block their pursuers. Lysara and Tarl followed, their fear pushing them onward. Once, a raider nearly grabbed Lysara, but Nathan was there, pulling her to safety and knocking the attacker away. Breathless, the three finally reached an old underground tunnel system. Nathan guided them into the darkness, closing the entrance behind them. The sound of the raiders faded, and for a while only their own ragged breathing filled the silence. In the darkness, Lysara felt panic rising, but Nathan's calm voice reassured her. "We're safe for now," he said softly. "Just a little farther." With Tarl limping, they made their way through the tunnels, using Nathan's flashlight to light the way. Old pipes dripped water, and strange echoes filled the air, but the promise of safety kept them going. At last, they found a ladder leading back to the surface. When they emerged, they saw the communications tower looming in the distance, half shrouded in mist. It looked damaged, but still stood taller than anything else in the city. A beacon of hope. Exhausted but determined, the small group pressed on, united by what they had survived together. Lysara glanced at Nathan and realized he had become much more than an enemy. He was a friend, maybe even a hero. As night began to fall again, Lysara looked back at the city behind them, then forward to the tower that could change everything. She didn't know what would happen next, but she knew one thing. She would never give up. And as long as Nathan was by her side, anything was possible. The city seemed to sleep under a blanket of gray clouds, but Lysara, Nathan, and Tarl did not rest. They had reached the foot of the communications tower by sunrise, exhausted yet determined. The tower loomed above the ruins, its top half bent, at an angle, metal beams jutting like broken bones. It had once been a proud part of the Zelari city, but now it looked as wounded as everyone who survived here. Nathan studied the structure carefully. "It's not safe, but it's our only chance," he said. Tarl, still limping from his injury, looked nervous, but tried to hide his fear. Lysara squeezed the young soldier's hand, offering silent support. They had come this far together, and she wasn't about to give up. They crossed the open square in front of the tower, moving from cover to cover. The wind howled between shattered buildings, carrying with it the faint sound of distant engines. Somewhere, raiders were still searching. Nathan motioned for quiet. They slipped through a broken side entrance and found themselves in a dark, echoing hall. The floor was scattered with fallen cables and shattered glass. Nathan led the way, flashlight in hand, searching for the main control room. The group climbed broken stairs, careful to avoid loose steps. Once, Tarl slipped and nearly fell, but Nathan caught him, steadying him with a firm grip. "We stick together," Nathan said quietly. As they climbed, Lysara thought of her father and her home. She wondered if anyone was still searching for her. Did they believe she was gone forever? The thought made her heart ache, but she pushed it aside. She needed to focus on the mission. Nathan had risked everything to help her, and now, with Tarl by their side, she felt a sense of responsibility to both of them. At last, they reached the control room, a circular chamber full of screens and blinking lights. Many systems were dead, but one old terminal still flickered with power. Nathan examined the controls, then looked to Lysara. "You know how to use this?" he asked. Lysara nodded. She remembered her training as a royal, how her tutors had insisted she learn every part of her world's technology. Sitting at the console, she tapped out commands, her hands shaking slightly. The screen came to life, showing a map of the area and a comms menu. She tried several frequencies, but most were blocked or damaged. Suddenly, Tarl shouted. A group of figures was moving in the street below. Raiders had found them. Nathan quickly closed the heavy door and pushed a cabinet against it. "Work fast," he told Lysara. "We don't have much time." Lysara sent out a distress signal on every Zalari and Terran channel she could find. She broadcast her identity using the royal code. If any Zalari ship was in range, they would know she was alive. Nathan kept watch, peering out the narrow windows. The raiders began to surround the tower, shouting to each other and firing warning shots into the air. The control room shook as something exploded on the lower floors. Nathan looked at Lysara. "We might have to fight." Lysara nodded, her voice steady. "I'm almost done. Just a little longer." Tarl took a weapon from the storage rack, his hands trembling. He looked at Nathan for instructions. Nathan checked his own rifle and gave Tarl a quick lesson on aiming and firing. "Stay calm. Only shoot if you have to." A second explosion rocked the tower. The raiders were coming up fast. Nathan glanced at Lysara. "Any luck?" Lysara's eyes lit up as a signal blinked green on the screen. "Someone's listening," she said. Quickly, she sent a message. "This is Princess Lysara of Zalari. I am alive, with survivors. Need rescue at Comms Tower. Hostile forces present." The reply came almost at once. A Zalari ship orbiting above the planet received her message. The captain's voice crackled through the speaker. "Hold your position. Extraction team inbound. ETA 20 minutes. Relief flooded the room, but danger was not over. The raiders began battering at the door, trying to break it down. Nathan, Tarl, and Lysara took up positions, ready to defend themselves. The next minutes felt like hours. Bullets struck the door, sparks flew, and smoke filled the air. Nathan fired warning shots, keeping the raiders at bay. Tarl, though frightened, helped reload the weapons, his courage growing with every minute. Lysara worked at the controls, activating the building's ancient defenses. A security drone whirred to life, spraying stun gas down the stairs. The raiders, surprised by the resistance, hesitated. Some shouted in anger, others tried to force their way in, but the gas and Nathan's precise shots slowed their advance. Lysara's heart pounded. She had never been so afraid, but she refused to show it. Suddenly, the sound of engines roared overhead. Looking out the window, Lysara saw a sleek Zalari dropship descending through the clouds, its bright lights cutting through the gray gloom. The raiders panicked at the sight of the ship, scrambling for cover. The dropship's doors slid open, and Zalari soldiers in shining armor rappelled down on cables. They fired stun rounds, scattering the raiders and securing the area. One of the soldiers rushed to the control room, helmet shining in the flickering lights. "Princess Lysara!" he called, his voice shaking with relief. Lysara ran to him and embraced him, tears finally streaming down her face. "You came," she whispered. Nathan and Tarl stood nearby, watching as more Zalari soldiers arrived. Some of the soldiers eyed Nathan with suspicion, weapons at the ready. Lysara quickly explained, speaking in her native tongue and then in broken Terran, "He is my friend. He saved me. He saved all of us." The Zalari commander nodded, trusting the princess's word, but his eyes remained wary. Nathan stepped forward, unarmed, and offered his hands in peace. "I only want to help," he said quietly. The rescue team hurried them to the dropship, where Lysara, Nathan, and Tarl were given seats. As the ship lifted off, Lysara looked out the window at the ruined city growing smaller below. She felt sadness for the place and for those left behind, but she was grateful to be safe at last. In the medical bay of the ship, Lysara's wounds were treated by Zalari doctors. Nathan's injuries were also cared for, though the alien technology was new to him. Tarl, still amazed by everything, looked at Lysara with gratitude. "Thank you, Princess," he whispered. When the dropship reached the Zalari capital, it was late evening. Lysara peered through the window, her breath catching as the silver towers of her home came into view. The city seemed unchanged, but she felt different. She was not the same princess who had left for battle. She had seen both, kindness and cruelty, hope and fear. King Jarion was waiting at the landing pad, his tall figure silhouetted against the palace lights. When the door opened and Lysara stepped out, the king froze, unable to believe his eyes. Then, with a cry of joy, he ran to his daughter and pulled her into his arms. For a moment, there was only family, only love, as father and daughter were, reunited at last. Nathan stood back, watching the reunion with a gentle smile. He felt relief and pride, but also worry. The Zalari soldiers were still watching him closely, unsure if he was friend or foe. Lysara noticed his discomfort and took his hand, leading him forward. "This human is not our enemy," she told her father, her voice strong and clear. "He saved my life. Without him, I would not be here." King Jarion looked at Nathan, his eyes full of questions. For a long moment, there was silence. Then the king nodded slowly, a sign of respect and gratitude. "You are welcome here, Nathan Carter," he said. "You are a friend to the Zalari people." Nathan bowed his head, humbled. Tarl stood beside him, now confident, proud to be part of this strange, brave group. Nathan Carter felt out of place in the grand halls of the Zalari palace. The walls glowed with soft light, and the floors shone like polished glass. But it was not the beauty of the alien city that made him uneasy. It was the eyes. Everywhere he went, curious and suspicious, Zalari stared at him, whispering behind their hands. To them, he was an outsider, maybe even a threat. Even the royal guards watched his every move, gripping their energy staffs a little tighter whenever he passed. "Princess." Lysara noticed all of this. She stayed close to Nathan, speaking to him in gentle words, guiding him through the endless maze of rooms and balconies. She introduced him to the palace staff and tried to explain the strange customs of her people. Nathan listened carefully, doing his best to remember each lesson. He didn't want to offend anyone, but sometimes he slipped up. Once, he bowed too deeply to an advisor and nearly lost his balance. Another time, he mistook a royal dessert for a cleaning sponge. Lysara only laughed, helping him feel at ease, but some in the court were not so amused. King Jarion spent much of his time with Lysara, wanting to hear every detail of her story. In the privacy of his chambers, Lysara told him everything about the crash, her struggle to survive, and how Nathan had saved not only her but also Tarl and other Zalari soldiers. The king listened in silence, his face a mixture of relief and deep thought. "Your courage amazes me, daughter," he said one night, his voice thick with emotion. And this human, he has shown great honor. Still, the king was torn. His advisors warned him not to trust a Terran. The memory of the long, brutal war hung over everyone like a shadow. Despite the whispers and doubts, Lysara stood by Nathan. She convinced her father to let Nathan attend a meeting of the Royal Council, where leaders from all over the Empire gathered. The council chamber was a circular hall filled with tall, robed Zalari, their faces serious and their eyes full of questions. Nathan sat quietly beside Lysara. He could feel the weight of their stares. The council debated whether to allow Nathan to remain as a guest or to send him back to Terran space at once. Some spoke harshly, blaming humans for every wound the Zalari people had suffered. Others remembered the stories of Lysara's rescue and wondered if peace was possible. At last, Lysara stood. She spoke to the council in strong, clear words, her voice echoing across the room. She told them how Nathan had risked his life to save hers, asking nothing in return. She described the moments they'd shared, how he'd helped Zalari soldiers, even though they were once enemies. "He showed me that not all humans are our foes," she said. "He is proof that there is another way, a better way." Nathan listened, moved by her words. When the council questioned him, he answered simply and honestly. He told them of his own losses in the war, his wish for peace, and his respect for the Zalari people. He spoke about his family, showing the small photo he carried. The council grew quiet as he described how he and Lysara had depended on each other to survive. The debate went on for hours. In the end, the council decided Nathan would not be sent away. He would remain in the palace as Lysara's guest, watched carefully but treated with respect. Some were not happy, but the king agreed. It was a small step, but an important one, by. The next days, news of Lysara's return and the human who helped her spread throughout the city and beyond. Many Zalari were curious about Nathan. Some children even followed him around, asking endless questions about Earth, Terran food, and human technology. Nathan smiled, answering as best he could. He showed them simple tricks, like how to make a paper bird, which amazed them. The sound of their laughter made him feel welcome. Meanwhile, Lysara tried to adjust to normal life. She visited the city's healing gardens, where the wounded from the war recovered among flowers and gentle music. She spoke to soldiers who had lost friends, giving them hope with her own story of survival. Tarl, now healed, joined her in these visits, becoming something of a local hero himself. One afternoon, Nathan was invited to meet with King Jarian privately. The king's study was lined with ancient books and artifacts from across the galaxy. The king studied Nathan for a long time before speaking. "You are a brave man, Nathan Carter," Jarian began. "You have my gratitude for saving my daughter. But I must ask, why did you risk your life for her when you could have escaped alone?" Nathan took a deep breath. "Because it was right," he said. "I couldn't leave someone behind, even if we started as enemies. On the battlefield, all that matters is saving lives. And Lysara became my friend. I promised to help her get home." The king nodded slowly. "You remind me of the best in my own people," he admitted. "Perhaps our worlds are not so different." Their conversation continued, and Nathan spoke honestly about the war and his hopes for the future. He offered ideas for peace, suggesting small ways that Zalari and humans might cooperate. The king listened carefully, making no promises. But Nathan sensed that his words had made an impact. Not everyone was pleased. In hidden corners of the palace, some advisors plotted to remove Nathan quietly, fearing he would influence the king. Rumors spread. Some claimed he was a spy. Others whispered that his presence would bring disaster. Lysara heard these whispers and confronted the advisors openly, daring them to bring their doubts to the council. Her courage and loyalty silenced many critics. One night, as Nathan gazed out over the city from a high balcony, Lysara joined him. The sky glowed with thousands of stars. "Do you miss your home?" she asked softly. Nathan nodded. "I do. But I'm glad I met you, Lysara. You showed me that hope can survive, even in the darkest times." Lysara smiled. "We survived because we trusted each other. Maybe our people can learn to trust too." As they talked, a palace messenger arrived in haste. "Your Highness, urgent news," he said, bowing. "A Terran delegation has entered Zalari space. They claim to come in peace and wish to meet with the king." Lysara and Nathan exchanged surprised glances. The arrival of humans in Zalari territory was both dangerous and promising. King Jarian wasted no time, summoning his advisors and preparing the palace for the visitors. The royal court buzzed with nervous energy. The Terran delegation, led by an old friend of Nathan's, arrived with gifts and messages of peace. The first meeting between Zalari and Terrans in years was tense but respectful. Nathan acted as translator and mediator, helping both sides understand each other. At times, the talks nearly broke down over old wounds and painful memories. But Lysara's presence, her story of survival with Nathan, reminded everyone of what could be gained by working together. After days of careful negotiation, the first steps toward a truce were taken. The king announced to his people that peace talks would continue and that he had seen bravery and kindness in both races. The news traveled quickly, stirring hope on both worlds. As the days passed, Nathan and Lysara continued to work together, guiding their people toward understanding. They met with young soldiers, taught children about each other's cultures, and even planned a festival of unity. Tarl, now a hero among both Zalari and Terrans, spoke at public gatherings, telling everyone about the friendship that saved them all. In the quiet moments between their duties, Nathan and Lysara walked the palace gardens, talking about the future. They knew there would be challenges ahead, and not everyone would support peace, but together, they believed anything was possible. On the night before the grand festival, as fireworks lit up the sky, Nathan realized that the palace no longer felt strange. The Zalari city, once so alien, was now filled with laughter, music, and hope, a place where two worlds could begin again. The morning of the Unity Festival arrived, filling the Zalari Palace and the capital city with a feeling that hadn't been known in years: hope. Banners of blue and gold fluttered from every window. In the main square, human and Zalari children worked side by side, stringing lights and planting rows of colorful flowers. Musicians, both Terran and Zalari, tuned their instruments, getting ready to play songs that had never mixed before. Nathan Carter stood on a balcony, watching the crowds gather. He could see Zalari families dressed in their best robes, smiling, as they talked with human guests. Children darted back and forth, laughing and tossing paper birds, a game Nathan had taught them. For the first time, the city didn't feel divided by suspicion or pain. For the first time, Nathan didn't feel like an outsider. Princess Lysara joined him, her gown shimmering in the early sunlight. She had never looked more confident. Beside her, Tarl wore a crisp uniform, medals gleaming on his chest. The young Zalari soldier grinned at Nathan, pride and excitement bright on his face. "You did this," Lysara said quietly to Nathan, watching the celebration grow. "You brought peace here?" Nathan shook his head, smiling. "We all did. You were the one who believed peace was possible." Their conversation was interrupted by King Jarian, who entered the balcony with his council. The king looked over the city, his eyes full of pride and relief. He turned to Nathan and Lysara. "Today will be remembered as the day our two peoples began a new journey together. Whatever happens next, remember that you made this possible." Down. In the square, the main festival began. Solari dancers moved in circles, their elegant gestures telling old stories of bravery and hope. Human musicians added a rhythm that blended beautifully with Zalari melodies. For many, it was their first time experiencing the other's culture so closely, and the sound of applause grew louder with every new performance. Nathan moved through the crowd, greeted by children who begged him to fold more paper birds. He showed them again, hands moving slowly so everyone could learn. Some Zalari parents watched carefully, surprised at how something so simple could bring so much happiness. In the gardens, Lysara welcomed the Terran delegates, introducing them to Zalari scholars and scientists. The air was full of friendly debates, questions, and laughter. Old soldiers from both sides shared their war stories, then threw them away, promising never to fight again. Even the most cautious and doubtful advisors could not deny the power of this day. But not everyone was at peace. In a quiet corner of the palace, two Zalari counselors met in secret. They worried that peace would weaken their world, that humans could never truly be trusted. One counselor, older and bitter from loss, suggested using the festival as a chance to send a warning, but the other, seeing the joy outside, hesitated. "Let us watch. If their friendship is real, there will be no danger." For now, the two simply waited, uncertain but unwilling to destroy what their princess had built. Meanwhile, Tarl stood on the palace steps, ready to give a speech. He glanced at Nathan and Lysara, who gave him reassuring nods. Taking a deep breath, Tarl spoke into the microphone, his voice trembling at first, but soon growing strong. "I was lost in battle and thought I would die alone," Tarl began, looking at the crowd. "But I was saved, first by a human, then by a princess who never gave up hope. Together we survived not because we were the same, but because we cared about each other. Today, let us promise to care for every stranger as if they could become our friend." The crowd cheered. Tears appeared in the eyes of parents, soldiers, and elders alike. Even the king was moved, wiping his eyes with a silk cloth. As the festival continued, Nathan found himself surrounded by reporters and artists. Everyone wanted to know his story. At first he felt shy, but Lysara gently encouraged him. So he spoke about the day he met Lysara in the ruins, about the fear and the trust that grew between them. He told the story of how they had helped Tarl and others, how their friendship had changed everything. A young Zalari artist asked if she could paint Nathan and Lysara together, to remember the day for future generations. Nathan agreed, feeling honored. The artist worked quickly, capturing not just their faces, but the feeling of hope that now filled the city. As afternoon faded into evening, the crowd gathered once more in the square. Lights flickered on, casting a gentle glow over the people. King Jarion stood on the palace balcony, with Lysara and Nathan beside him. The Terran delegation stood nearby, smiling at the warmth that now filled the air. The king raised his hand, and the crowd fell silent. Today, we remember all those lost in war, but we also celebrate those who chose peace. We are not the same, but we share the same sky and the same dreams. My daughter and her friend Nathan Carter have shown us that friendship can heal even the oldest wounds." He turned to Nathan. "Will you say a few words, as a guest and as a friend?" Nathan hesitated for a moment, then stepped forward, looking out at the sea of faces. He thought about the long journey that brought him here, about the fear and the hope, the pain and the laughter. "I came here as a soldier," Nathan said, his voice steady, "but I found something greater than any battle, a family, not just Lysara and Tarl, but all of you. The first step to peace is understanding, and the second is forgiveness. I believe we can do both, together." Applause thundered through the city. The fireworks began, painting the night with bright colors. As the crowd watched, Nathan and Lysara stood side by side, smiling at the future they had helped create. Later, in the quiet of the palace gardens, Lysara and Nathan walked among the glowing lanterns, listening to the distant music and laughter. "What will you do now?" Lysara asked softly. Nathan thought for a moment. "I'd like to stay for a while. There's still so much to learn, so much to do, and I want to help make sure this peace lasts." Lysara smiled, a spark of mischief in her eyes. "I was hoping you'd say that. The galaxy is wide, but with friends by your side, even the impossible seems possible." They paused by a fountain, the water shimmering with reflections of the festival lights. Tarl joined them, smiling wide. "You two are legends now," he teased. "But don't let it go to your heads," Nathan laughed. "I'll try not to, but if I do, you have my permission to remind me where I came from." The three stood together, united not by blood, but by the battles they'd faced and the friendship they'd forged. Above them, the stars seemed brighter than ever, as if the universe itself celebrated their peace. Far away, messages of the festival reached the edges of Zalari and Terran space. Soldiers in distant outposts stopped fighting, even for a little while, to listen to stories of the princess and the human who changed history. On Earth and the Zalari homeworld, people spoke with new hope about the future, and so the story of Lysara and Nathan became a legend. Not just of two survivors, but of two worlds learning to trust. Children grew up hearing how enemies became friends, how peace was built by courage and kindness, not just by treaties and promises. Years later, whenever the Unity Festival was celebrated, Zalari and humans alike would tell the story of the day a lost princess returned, not alone, but with a human by her side. They would say it proved that, no matter how great the distance or how old the wounds, friendship and hope could always lead the way home. And as long as the stars shone above, the memory of that first festival, of the courage, the laughter, the new beginnings, would never fade.